You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we are your hosts for this show. And, of course, as you guys have known, if you're regular viewers of ours, we have been a little bit away for a while. We haven't really been keeping the schedule up too much. You know, it's been work issues, illnesses. My dad, you know, he's facing a lot of health challenges, as is my mom. I mean, it's just been really crazy. But there's been a lot going on. Today is the first day of Star Wars Celebration. You and I have been talking about a lot of the news, like the Ahsoka trailer. You know, where we got a little bit of a glimpse of Thrawn. We've got, I think they actually revealed some Skeleton Crew stuff. They talked about how they're gonna tie up the whole Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett and everything with a, like a movie or something. I mean, there's just been all this news coming out. So what we're going to do is tonight we are reviewing, obviously, chapters 21 and 22. We're really behind on a lot of this stuff. So we're going to do that. And Monday, we're going to resume our What is Star Wars thing with The Last Jedi review, which, you know, Ronaldo, we're glad you're joining us. Ronaldo already is saying he has issues with chapter 22, and he wishes my parents well, which I really appreciate. Thank you guys. You know, it has been really tough between all the stuff we've had to face, but that's why even more so, I look forward to coming on here with Daryl and talking to you guys about Star Wars. Probably what's going to happen, I don't know, maybe Monday the 16th, because I'm going to be out of town that day. We're probably going to do like a pre-recorded, you know, it'll premiere, so you guys will still be able to chat in. But I think we're going to do like a whole Star Wars Celebration wrap-up, recap, and just talk about all the things that are going on this weekend. You know, I'm sure we'll do at some point an Ahsoka trailer reaction. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can be doing. You know, unfortunately, this is a good problem to have. There's just like a lot of Star Wars things going on at once right now, and we're only on twice a week. So, and, you know, lately not even that, right? Because, you know, but we're here for you guys. So, yeah, chapters 21 and 22. Now, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, I'll just give like this sort of big overview, like what we usually do, you know, when we're reviewing one episode, of just like a couple little thoughts about each one, and then we could delve into it, much like what we did before, where we just talked about them both simultaneously. We could take one at a time. Yeah, this is like a big discussion. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about this show, by the way, before we get into this, is the fact that, you know, in a lot of cases, we're not like a lot of the other YouTubers out there. I mean, if you look at all the other YouTubers that cover entertainment, or even especially Star Wars, it's almost gotten corporate now. I don't know how many shows you've been watching, but I watch a lot of YouTube shows. And, you know, it's all about sponsorships and, you know, tricking the algorithm and all that stuff. And we're just basically real people, real fans, no agenda, just talking Star Wars with you guys. So, chapters 20, 21, and 22, they're very different episodes, right? Like, 21, I think, was actually in a lot of ways the ideal Mandalorian episode. It was an action-packed adventure, sort of keeping you on the edge of your seat. It was fast-paced. It wasn't like Rise of Skywalker fast-paced, but it was actually good. And I thought it was a really good episode. I know some people were complaining about the fact that, you know, because it was sort of this little standalone thing with Grief Karga and all that, maybe it didn't go far enough. And that's actually one of the criticisms of the season, is that it's not going far enough to, I mean, you know, we're in episode 5. We're only now getting to the whole, hey, we're going to reunite Mandalore part, right? And people thought that that's what this whole season was going to be about. The thing about chapter 6, or not chapter 6, chapter 21, episode 6, or 22 rather, that one, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It actually was very much Like, and we always do this genre thing. It was literally a Star Wars Law and Order episode. That's exactly how it struck me. And
Hmm.
I enjoyed it overall, but yeah, I had some big problems with it.
With 21?
22.
Oh,
With
22.
Lizzo
Oh,
and
okay.
Jack Black and Christopher
Oh,
Lloyd. And,
yeah.
Lizzo
Yeah.
cannot act
Yeah.
at all. I mean, the character was, Doug and I were talking about this today too. The characters were actually cool, but they needed to be played by, I think, different actors. Christopher Lloyd's performance was probably the best of all the guest stars. He kind of reminded me of his villain in, remember Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of had that same vibe going. Let me get to this thing with, as Ronaldo's starting to talk about this a little bit. He says, I think episode 21 was really fun. Really surprised with Zeb's cameo. Yeah, that was probably one of the highlights for me too. And again, much like
Yeah.
what they did with Cad Bane, I thought that it was really well done how they rendered this character in live action. But overall, like if you just had to give like a sentence or two overall about what you were feeling about chapters 21 and 22, what are you thinking?
21 was, like you said, really fun. It was that typical Mandalorian adventure type thing. It felt like Star Wars. It was really cool. But 22, I liked it too. I liked it as well. I mean, I thought um it touched on some things. We're starting to get into the heart and the meat of Mandalore and all of that. So, and I know that's kind of what we all kind of expected to hear more of. And it's weird because so far, like these episodes, these last, probably say last three, because you had 21, 22, and then the one with Dr. I almost call him Dr. Afro.
Pershing.
uh, Dr.
Dr.
Pershing,
Pershing, yeah.
yes. There's a lot, and that's why I feel like this season needs to be long, because there's a lot of stuff you're opening up here that we need to cover, and it's like, I mean, obviously it's probably going to span the rest of the others into the next season, but yeah, I just really thought that these were we're opening we're going a lot of different places and directions, which I like, but in some ways we're losing some continuity, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense because one of my complaints about this season is that it's taking too long to get to where they need to go. I mean, it's almost like they're dragging their feet. And again, unlike a lot of reviewers of this thing, I enjoyed a lot of, I guess I'm enjoying the ride. That's probably the best way to put it. Whereas a lot of people are thinking in terms like, yeah, when are you going to get to, because it's true, this season is meandering a little bit. It is. I mean, that's a fair criticism. But in that sense, though, I think that in a lot of ways, even though the season is meandering a little bit, even though there's some pointless elements to it, I think it's a fun enough ride. I think it is providing some things. In the case of chapter 21, Grief Karga's thing, I really thought that whole thing was really well done. You really felt the sense of helplessness he had when the pirates took over the town. And he's reaching out, and it actually had shades of The Last Jedi to me when, Leia's reaching out for help or whatever, and nobody answers the call. And they realize that what's left of the Resistance is essentially in that room. And it really isn't until the end of The Rise of Skywalker that you actually get people that are coming back and pretty much helping out. And you felt that sense of, here's Grief. He's a character who he's trying to rebuild this little society and create this almost utopian little city that everybody's cool, everybody lives in peace. He's just trying to be a businessman type of a thing. And he's constantly getting attacked or threatened in some way, and there's not a whole lot he can do about it. He just doesn't have the means to protect himself.
Yeah, and of course, he's thinking like, okay, there's no empire, so there's you really don't have some big threat like a first order or the empire or anything like
Hmm.
breathing down your neck. So he doesn't necessarily need to worry about that, but you still have all these other miscellaneous little factions, gangs, pirates, people who still are, nefarious and who still want to um have their way. And so,
And
of
still
course,
possess the
he's
power to take over. I
yeah,
mean, when you saw how
and
they
they have
took
enough
over,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, they have enough, and so it's like now when you and part of me wish Hondo would have showed up or something like that, um but I think the fact that he reached out to Mando, and well, he tried to reach out to Mando and um the one New Republic officer, he was like, hey, look, man, just thought you should know your friend's kind of in trouble. So
Well, that was
you
actually a
know
really cool scene too, where
that was a really cool gesture because he didn't have to do
he
that.
didn't have to
He was
do
just
that, and it was you could feel the tension between him and the Mandalorians. He was really taking a big risk showing up
hmm
there. I mean, there's
right.
you could tell, and then of course the whole idea that the Mandalorian's like, okay, great, yet again somebody discovers where we're hiding and we have to move somewhere else. And I thought it was really
hmm
interesting in that episode how, of course, Din makes his case and he's trying to get everybody, and then Paz Vizsla, stands up, and it almost looks like he's gonna try to do what you would expect him to do and shoot down the idea. And he starts out where he's basically saying that, and then all of a sudden he just shifts gears and says, "No, we should stop running. We should do this."
This is who we
And
are.
yeah, this is who we are. And so I really like where they're going with the Mandalorians in this, and I like the way they're handling the characterization of that.
I like the way that they're starting to respect Dan. It's not like, they kind of allowed him in, like, okay, you went and purified yourself and um the waters of Mandalore, and now he's kind of has like more of a voice in the coven. He's kind of like right up there with the armorer um and Vizsla. He's kind of one of the focal points, as far as one of the leaders, because you really don't hear much from a lot of them. And so now the fact that he's kind of stepping up and saying, hey, look, you guys don't have to come, but this guy, he's offered a sanctuary. We need land. We need a new place to hide anyway. He's offering this to us. We might as well. And the guys had a change of heart. So, you know, um, but I love the fact that um Paz Vizsla was just kind of like, you kind of think he's going one way with it, and then
Yeah.
he's like,
And then he
he
goes
hits you with
completely the
the
other way.
other way. So I thought that was really nice.
Well, and the other thing that I thought was really cool about it too was the fact that you have this whole thing going on between the armorer and bo-katan as well, because the armorer basically pulls bo-katan aside and it's just like, hey, if anybody's going to lead us, it's going to have to be you. And I love the fact that she basically was having her remove her helmet and you know say, hey, we're going to need a new leadership. We're all going to have to reunite all these tribes. And I just
hmm
thought that that was a really interesting twist. Again, this whole
Yeah,
season has been things that I haven't expected, but I've liked.
yeah, definitely. And the appearance of Zeb once again, that was just completely out of the blue. I was just like, is
What
that
I liked
Zeb?
is they
I'm
didn't
just
beat you over the head with it either. It was kind of like he
yeah,
was there, but it didn't feel like it was shoehorned in or anything like that. It just felt like,
yeah. It's kind of like when Chopper rolled by in Rogue One or something like that, or
yeah,
or
yeah.
Harrison Dula over the
Hmm.
PA or something like that, or Captain Syndulla. Just little things like that was really
Yeah, let me get some of
was
these
really cool.
chats in here because Ronaldo's had a lot to say while we've been talking. He says, I enjoyed 22. Now, talking about the next episode. It felt like a side quest in Knights of the Old Republic. It does, actually. And I love when Star Wars feels like a video game. Yeah, of course, he also says, but the writing was not good. Um, yeah, so 2022, unlike 21, I think suffered from a few things. Again, even though overall I would say I enjoyed the episode, I think the problem with 22 is that 22 suffered from a little bit of a pacing issue. It had some, how do I want to put this? Almost like some gaps in the writing. Like there were some things that I actually thought were cool about chapter 22. I like the whole Star Wars meets Law and Order thing. I always like it when they take a familiar genre or even some sort of a template of storytelling and they just plug the Star Wars universe into it. I think that's actually cool, and I'd like to see more of that. And that was one of the things that we actually found out about this whole this next movie that's coming up, Dawn of the Jedi or something. It's going to be kind of like a 10 Commandments, like some biblical epic type of thing. And they're going to go back into that Cecil B. DeMille style of filmmaking. And that could actually be an extraordinary thing. So anytime that you get Star Wars being plugged into some of these familiar things, like a Law and Order, for instance, it's really good. But the problem is there's some things that maybe didn't land well with a lot of people. There were some things that people didn't like, but I actually thought was interesting, like that droid bar thing. I thought was
Oh yeah.
that was actually kind of a cool concept, and I liked when they walked in there. And I don't know about you, but I fully expected when they walked in
We don't
there,
serve your kind here.
yes, for the droid bartender to say, "Hey, you too, we don't serve your kind here," or something like that. And again, it's probably better that they didn't, because again, that would have been, oh look,
On the nose.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that they used some restraint, but I mean, overall, there are some elements of that chapter that I did like, but there was, I don't know. It's like, okay, yeah, you can go talk to these Mandalorians, but you got to solve this crime. And I mean, it was just, I don't know. There was some, I mean, I like the planet. I like the city. I don't know. It just seemed like it was a little bit too much of a detour in some ways. But again, the whole Law and Order vibe I thought was clever. Maybe it just didn't belong in this episode. I don't know. It was just some of the writing was a little weird too in it, but
Maybe it's the placement of this episode, like
maybe that could be
where
too.
it's,
Yeah.
and it's like if this would have been like one of those maybe at the beginning of the season, type thing, maybe that would have landed better because it's like, okay, I must like put your filler episodes towards the beginning, and then maybe by like episode or chapter 4 of the season, then you start ramping up, getting to your main point and make everything kind of lead up to the season finale.
Yeah, but the only problem that I have with that, which again, that's probably true too, but it's like, where do you put it, right? Because now you bring up the point that some of our viewers have actually brought up over the season, where it's still a relatively short season. I mean, even with 10 episodes or whatever, it's still a relatively short season. And they have to be careful about what they introduce, because if you're going to put in a quote unquote filler-ish episode, I wouldn't dismiss this entire episode as filler, but definitely it's like, look, you're getting to the meat of this thing pretty much right at the end. That's the part that's a little disconcerting. And Ronaldo even brings up, he goes, I agree, it would have been better if the season was longer, or don't use a lot of side quest episodes.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that you have to make a decision. If you're going to do these kind of shows, you either have to lengthen the season, maybe do like an Andor or something where it's like 12 episodes. And maybe, maybe you do it in quarters, right? So I mean, that was one of the things that I loved about Andor, honestly, was they had these like 3-episode story arcs, and you had 4 of them. They could do that. They can maybe do 2 episodes of real story and then an episode of side quest filler, whatever you want to call it. You could do that too. And then he goes on to say, but 21 was good. I enjoyed the classic idea of evil people attacking a small village, used a lot in Star Wars lately. You're absolutely right. That is a recurring theme. But
Well,
it
yeah,
makes
that's kind of
sense.
yeah, it does. I mean, when you're talking about a galactic situation, um, when you go back to the prequels, or it's always like, oh, you know, um, the separatists are attacking Naboo, or you have um the Empire's trying to invade some planet or whatever, like Endor or whatever the case may be. That you always have. That's kind of pretty much every Star Wars trilogy has that to some degree. Where they're
Oh,
taking
yeah.
over a village, or they're taking over something, and we saw it in Andor, we saw it in um Obi-Wan, we saw it. I mean, and that's the thing, is because they're always trying to acquire and accumulate, more systems to their cause to have more control.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's in Rebels, with they were on uh what's Ezra's home?
Lothal.
Lothal. I can't want to say Ryloth, but it's not Lothal. Yeah, Lothal. You have these occupying forces that are just always trying to seize more control. So it's a typical Star Wars trope.
Well, not only is it a typical Star Wars trope, it's realistic. This is the kind of thing that you would face if you had this galaxy of a bunch of different people, right? All these different planets. And you have to understand that during this time, the New Republic is just starting to take hold, but they don't necessarily have a complete foothold in the galaxy yet. You even heard it referenced in chapter 21, actually, where it's like, well, the New Republic barely has the mid rim, button down. So the outer rim is going to suffer a little bit. So you still have the New Republic who is taking over. They also have to worry about the remnants of the Empire, because even though the Empire fell, they're still making trouble for everybody. So you almost have this little no man's land in a way. The New Republic isn't fully solidified like they were around the time of the sequel trilogy, but at the same time, the Empire doesn't have a foothold on it either. So, like I said, you kind of have this middle ground where pirates and smugglers and warlords and all this stuff can still flourish. And that's why I think you can basically tell these kind of stories in this time period. Ronaldo says, one thing I've enjoyed with this episode and Dr. Pershing's is that you can see how the New Republic makes mistakes and gives priority to ally systems and not small systems with no protection. Which, again, I applaud them,
Hmm.
because this is a realistic move. And honestly, if depending on how they frame this, we're only siding with the others because that's the lens that we're seeing this. We're seeing Greef's whole thing and all that. If you were looking at it from the New Republic standpoint, they're not wrong.
Hmm.
I mean,
No, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, and that's the problem when you're trying to build something, is that, like, it's almost kind of like the hairstyle, and I'll use this as an example. It's kind of like dreadlocks, right? If a person wants dreadlocks, it's like, okay, first you got to grow your hair out long enough, and then you got to kind of put in those little twists, and it kind of goes through what we like to call the ugly stage first. So you kind of have this ugly stage, this kind of no man's land, where you kind of have these little knots and these little twists before your hair really starts to lock together. And then you can start really starting to see the dreadlocks start coming to fruition. But until that happens, you kind of stuck, like you said, Eric, in this little no man's land, in this little, almost like a little gray area where it's not always the best look that you want right now, but you just have to be patient. And unfortunately, in this situation with the New Republic, as they're trying to, because you got to think about it, like, they just came off the heels of, the Empire is destroyed. I mean, you essentially, and because it's not like the New Republic was going against the Empire, you had a rebellion. It's basically like a bunch of militia or renegades who are just trying to like, okay, we want to bring down the Empire because they're oppressing us. But then now you have to try to restart a civilized government. It means you got to elect people, you got to come up with rules, laws, you got to, all right, what's our military going to look like? So you have to restructure everything to look like a working government again. That takes
Well,
time.
yeah.
So it's like, I get it. So while they're trying to still sweep up the remnants of the empire, you still got all these other, gangs. And the gangs know that. They know, like, okay, the New Republic's not thinking about us out here, because they're too busy trying to put their whole little thing together. But we could clean up while everybody's doing that. It's.
Oh, it's like Christmas out there. And look, you don't
Hmm.
even, the dreadlock thing is a perfect example. But, the other one is like, look, with long hair too, it's like you have that awkward phase. You're growing it out from a shorter hairstyle and then it's kind of growing. It's not long enough to really style it yet, but it's not short enough to do what you used to do. So you do run into all these little issues. So, yeah, it's very much that middle stages. And a lot of times, and this is where I think some people are going to be on board with this, some not. And this is the problem. When you are able to tell a more macro version of the story, you can keep it rooted in fantasy. You can do the whole good versus evil thing, and that's fine. However, if you're going to take this universe and you're going to start getting into the minutia of things and you're going to start telling very specific stories, well, then you do have to start to delve into some of the political stuff and everything else, because you can't keep it very macro and keep it. And again, you don't necessarily want to use the word realistic when you're dealing with fantasy or sci-fi fantasy in this case. But at the same time, you do want to keep it grounded in its own reality. And I think that that's the difference. I think that that's where
Absolutely.
people make the mistake with Star Wars all the time, is they're like, well, it's maybe this isn't realistic. That's not science fiction. Pure science fiction is where you have to try to explain the science and everything behind it, because that's what it is. It's rooted in more of a real base thing. That's why when you had Star Trek and all this stuff, they actually had NASA engineers that were pretty much advising them. But with a
Hmm.
fantasy based thing, and that's what this is, a sci-fi fantasy after all. Um, you don't want to necessarily do that. And then Ronaldo says making the same mistakes the previous Republic made. You can see they have good intentions, but still a young government. And that's
Hmm.
that's it. Ronaldo, he's got a couple comments. We'll go through these. He says the ship battles were very cool and well made. Totally agree. He agrees with you, actually. The idea of Chapter 22 is cool, but don't put it in the final episodes, especially when we just started the main focus of the season. Yeah, that's I don't. That's the thing. This whole thing seemed a little out of nowhere to me. It basically was like we were going on, and then at the end, it's like, okay, cool. The Mandalorians basically helped out, and they made this idea like, yes, we're gonna unite. We're gonna try to basically restart Mandalore again and free it and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, now we're visiting essentially like a scene out of Coming to America. I mean, that was basically kind of what was the country called in Coming to America?
Zamunda.
Zamunda. That's
Yes.
basically what that was. That was Space Zamunda. Like that's what it totally reminded me of. I'm like, okay, we got Star Wars meets Law and Order meets Coming to America. And then in the final, like 5 minutes or something, now we're going to deal with the actual meat of the episode when we only have, I think, like 3 or 4 episodes left or something.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
But it just depends on how long those episodes are, though.
Well, all
That's the
right.
other thing that could happen. That's the
Yeah.
other thing that could happen if they make the other episodes. So what they can't do is shorten. If they want to keep the 10 episode schedule, fine. But the next, like we say, 3 or 4 episodes, they can't be like 30-minute, 40-minute episode. They got to be kind of like almost like your full 60 if you want to cover, everything.
Well, the encouraging thing is that they are, when you look at these last few episodes, they've been like an average of around 45 minutes. So I think that they are trying to at least give us more of a chunk. And again, and this is why I thought that some of the stuff was cool in chapter 22, which is episode 6. Now, that was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, I think. I'm pretty sure 22 was.
22?
I think so. And it basically had a little bit of her style in it as well. But her episodes always tend to be, if they're not longer, they're a lot meatier, which surprised me in a way that this episode had this tone. You can look it up. Actually, also look up who did chapter 21. I'd be curious to know that. Let me get this thing in from Ronaldo here while you're doing that. He says, the thing with the New Republic is they'll help ally systems, but if they don't have a way to help non-ally systems, they're like, well, too bad. Good luck with your problem. Well, here's the thing, and this is what I thought was really curious about this whole attitude that the New Republic has. Because remember, that one commander was basically trying to say, like, guys, I don't think that this is just a little skirmish with pirates or something. There's something going on. There's a lot of things that are being tied together out here. There's something out there happening in the Outer Rim. I think that you should maybe pay attention to what's going on here. And it's interesting, and I love the line that he says, remember when he goes, by the time we realize there's a problem, it's going to be too late. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, honestly, we only have 2 more episodes.
Oh, right, because there's only 8. I don't know why I thought there was 10.
Peter Ramsey did 21, and then Bryce Dallas Howard did 22.
Okay. So I thought it was something like that. But again, you have to think in terms with this type of storytelling. And I'm sure they did this. I'm sure they actually went and said, okay, we got 10 episodes or 8 episodes. I'm determined to make this thing 10. We got 8 episodes. We're going to divide it up like this. I mean, Filoni and Favreau do put some thought into it. I'm just not entirely sure, though, that in order to make some of these what they would call either fan-friendly episodes or maybe some fun episodes along the way, I don't know if they necessarily understand that their audience wants the episode that has a little meat on the bone. Give us something that, can we just have relevant episodes? I mean, if you want to go and do a 12, 16 episode season, yeah, great. But, Ronaldo, this is true. He says, you can see how the First Order eventually formed. They can't see a problem that's not in front of their eyes. He goes on to say, another very little problem is that the whole population of Nevarro were like 10 people. But it wasn't a big issue. And then, he's saying, I think probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Ronaldo, you're talking about chapter 22 in this one. Overall, not a perfect episode, but it was fun and enjoyable. Very good. Yeah. I don't know. I just think that maybe, particularly with chapters 22, and yeah, Ronaldo confirmed that was what he was talking about. 22 is a little bit strange because, like I said, there's a lot of things I liked about it. I like Christopher Lloyd's performance. I like the whole concept of the droid bar. I like the Clone Wars nods. I like the whole battle droids and all that stuff. And I also like the plot where they were going a little crazy and they were trying to figure out why. And I mean, honestly, when I had always said that Star Wars would work as a mystery, like you can make a Star Wars mystery show or mystery movie, this is a perfect example of how you can do that. The problem is, and I'm sure that you and I are probably in line on this, is that maybe don't do that during this show or this season, or, you know, if you want to make, you know, Bo-Katan and Din Djarin kind of like, you know, Law and Order detectives, and, you know, they have to go on this case and figure out this problem. Great. Maybe do a spin-off of that or something, or whatever, or kind of do what they're doing with Marvel, you know, where they sort of turn the Loki series a little bit into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're trying to deviate from I mean, I guess I don't have a problem if it leads to something that's relevant. You know what I'm saying? So if they're solving this case or whatever, but it leads to something that's essential for them to be involved in, that's going to truly move the story ahead, then at least the payoff of it is good.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, that's true. But I mean, and you can almost argue that, well, it might be kind of tough, because honestly, if they wanted to do that too, maybe do it within the context, because it's sort of like what Ronaldo said, right? It almost seemed like this was sort of one of those Knights of the Old Republic side quest things that have nothing to do with the main quest. If you took that same concept, but had it somehow fit into, you know, fit into that, right? That would be interesting. Ronaldo says, speaking about battle droids, have we ever seen one of those run like that? I don't know.
Don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, so now we got a new comment here. 06 Merc, I guess. I'm 28. I won't pay for the streaming services. I buy bootleg DVDs of all the Mandalorians once seasons are over. But frankly, Jack Black and Lizzo might be enough for me to totally write this season off. Look, man, I mean, I can't blame you. Honestly, I
would say they have to get actors like this because you keep bootlegging the DVDs. See, they need your money so they can hire better actors.
Right. Exactly. See, if you'd stop bootlegging the DVDs, they'd get better people, right?
See, they know you're bootlegging. That's why they stick that in there.
Well, see, what they figured is, hey, look, they got bootleg DVDs, we'll get bootleg actors.
Exactly. But no, I agree, though. I mean, yeah, the Jack Black Lizzo thing, I mean, hopefully we're not in for any more of that, you know, for these last 2 episodes.
I hope
But
not.
what I am curious about is, like, you know, what cliffhanger are they going to leave, or what? Because, you know, every season we get a surprise. Season 1, Darksaber. Season 2, good old Luke shows up.
Season 3, we got Jack Black and Lizzo. I think that's
right.
the big, because trust me, I was surprised. I really was.
Yeah.
Ronaldo says,
or maybe it was Zeb. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there you go. That could be. The droid nightclub was cool, though, Ronaldo says. I felt empathy for the droids. They have a really hard life. And then he says, oh, this is great. Can you imagine L3's reaction to the way the droids are being treated on this planet in the droid nightclub? That would be interesting.
See, that's probably what the show Droids was going to be about. Remember that?
Boy.
They scrapped that?
Oh, man, yes. I
I know.
All right. Well, let me make this point, though. So I think that in a lot of ways, yes, the Jack Black Lizzo thing. Now, Christopher Lloyd, I could actually hang with that because, again, I thought that he did a good job. Now, he definitely looks like Palpatine now. It's almost like, hey, listen, you know, if Ian McDiarmid ever gets tired of it, you could just put Christopher Lloyd up there. You don't even have to do the makeup because he's kind of 80% there already. But, you know, again, he kind of reminded me of that Who Framed Roger Rabbit villain that he had. He had a certain amount of, like, he was pretending to be cool and everything like that, but he was a little sinister.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, the only thing is, you know, when they captured him, they brought him before, it was totally like a Scooby-Doo thing.
Right.
All they had to
Mister.
do was pull the mask
Yep.
off. Security chief, whoever.
I'm like, I would have too.
And he's
We want
going
to be
back and
meddling
talking about it.
Mandalorians.
But again, that was one of the scenes where I felt a little, like, I felt kind of chilled. There was an ominousness about this society that is totally dependent on droids. That's another thing that I thought. And of course, in today's climate, you can almost accuse them of making some sort of a commentary to artificial intelligence. And this is where we're headed, where it's so bad that if they shut these droids off, they wouldn't even have a society because everybody kind of forgot how to work and forgot how to do anything. So they're completely dependent. And then what happens in this society if the droids start to go a little haywire or maybe take over or whatever? There was a lot of, I thought, really cool concepts in there that they handled mostly well. But again, I think it's something that maybe could have been explored in a different story arc, maybe in a I don't know, in a different series or something.
What I thought was funny about that, about Din working in the whole droid, basically a droid run planet. Remember how he used to hate droids?
Well, that was one of the things that I thought was really cool about him kind of going off, where, if you remember, she said, what was the line? Bo-Katan said something like he started saying stuff about the droids, and she was like, oh, well, you gotta, because, yeah, he was still being suspicious, although this time he actually had a reason to be, though.
Mm-hmm.
Ronaldo says, now Grogu is not only a Jedi and a Mandalorian, he's also a Plazir 5 Knight for no reason. That was... Man, that's another good point. I actually forgot about that scene.
That is a valid point, yes.
There was like, okay, it was kind of cool that she was carrying him around and all that stuff or whatever. But yeah, that last scene where all of a sudden, like, she pulls out this sword and I'm gonna knight you. I'm like, what? Why?
For what?
What is this?
Exactly.
What does this mean? There's no precursor to this ceremony. It's just out of nowhere. She just, like, the sword comes out. I'm like, whoa.
It's got to do something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got to make... Well, at least she wasn't walking around with her hind parts hanging out. So, I mean, at least that was very well covered.
That's true. And, I mean, okay, into the costuming department, before she opened her mouth and said anything, she looked like a typical Star Wars queen, which I appreciated that. And I thought that the makeup and everything they did on Jack Black was cool, too. Ronaldo says Christopher Lloyd was cool, but I think his character's motivation wasn't totally explained. Only part of it. But I like that he was a separatist. That's actually a really cool thing that I meant to bring up, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking that at the time that I was watching it, that I loved how he brought Dooku's name into it, and he started talking about, because you got to figure, like, even during this time, the Clone Wars took up this big chunk of time and everybody was all about it or whatever. And then all of a sudden it went away under the Empire. But you got to figure there's still people alive, like older people alive, that still remember this time period very well and who were separatists. And so, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts were on this, but I agree. I thought it was really a nice touch that they brought the whole separatist angle into this and how they might feel right now.
Well, yeah, I like the fact that they bring in little nods with the prequels, him, because you got like the Naboo Starfighter or the N1. You got, Christopher Lloyd's character being a separatist. I think there was somebody else. It was, or even the battle droids. The fact that you're seeing prequel era battle droids, and the mention of clone troopers and things like that. So they're kind of keeping everything, and they're kind of showing like the transition of things through the years. So we've had that era, we had the Imperial era, and then we're still seeing like basically the throwbacks. So, and that's what the prequel era was for them. It's like a throwback stuff. So it's like, oh, well, yeah, we repurposed these old things. But for us, it was like, oh, battle droids or droidicons. You know what I'm saying? Like we're still seeing those.
Yeah, which is a realistic thing, because I always thought I mean, look, the reality is none of this stuff was invented in 1977, so that's why we don't see it in the original trilogy, but it
True.
is conspicuously absent. Now, you can frame around that by saying, look, we're only focused on this one little window, right? We're Luke's thing and then the Empire and all that. So you could say, okay, well, we're not visiting a ton of different worlds here. The ones that they do are kind of remote, right? Tatooine, Hoth, Dagobah,
Mm-hmm.
the forest moon of Endor. I
Andor.
mean,
Yep.
yeah, you can make the case that okay, maybe you're not going to see too many remnants or anything like that. But I do like the fact that yes, they're starting to show that yeah, you remember that big Clone Wars thing that took up like 10 years and there was untold amount of battles and I mean it's
Mm-hmm.
it's like look, you're going to have and then of course people that were alive back then that still had their feelings and all that. Sure, you're going to have stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you know essentially it still is around. Now I'm trying to
So
think of
which
this.
of you?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to ask you, what was your favorite episode between the two?
Oh, definitely 21. I mean, I would
Okay.
definitely say 21 because the thing about 21 is that it actually had everything that I liked about the Mandalorian, and it was a somewhat of a pulse pounding episode. You know, um, I think that one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was the fact that, like I said, it was paced well. Yeah, you had the Zeb cameo, you had some of that stuff, but I just really liked the fact that it had all the elements and it felt like Star Wars. Whereas Chapter 22, sure, it kind of felt like Star Wars, but I don't know, it had elements of other franchises in there too. The pacing was weird. There was some poorly written parts, poorly acted stuff, stuff that made no sense, stuff that didn't even need to be there. That's kind of, I guess, where I land with that one. Whereas
Okay.
21, the whole standoff, the battle scene was really cool. The fact that, the armor starts talking to Bo-Katan and she's like, remove your helmet. And, Bo-Katan's like, it's a trick question. Should I be doing
Yeah,
this?
like now I gotta fly back to Mandalore again, and
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, come on. But then they brought up that whole thing, right? You saw the mythosaur, so that means that you're the one that should, rule
mm-hmm.
Mandalore for some weird reason. And here's the other thing that I'll tell you right now that was really stupid to me about Chapter 22. I get it, but this bothered me. Okay, so now, after all this time, they're facing, what's the dude's name? Axe something or whatever. That other Mandalorian that kind of split off and he ruled that other little faction that was already on the planet.
Oh.
I'm sure
Uh,
Ronaldo will text it in. But pretty much, you know, it's kind of like, oh, well, you don't have the
Axe
dark saber.
Wolves.
Yeah, Axe Wolves, that's it. It's like, well, you don't have the dark saber. And Din's all, oh, wait a minute. Well, technically, you freed me from that monster and you defeated my captor. So, here, the sword's yours. It's like, okay, you're doing this now. You knew about this before, and so did Bo-Katan. And this is a thing they took because in season 2 they perfectly set up this really cool thing. Like, okay, they're working together, but eventually we're
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna have to settle
Something's
this
gonna,
somehow.
yeah,
Yeah,
something's
this
gonna have to be done about this, right?
yes, this is gonna have to be. And they could have really spent this season to where maybe toward the season finale, Bo-Katan's like, look, I think you're great, whatever, but I got to challenge you to
I'm,
combat now. It's like
I'm gonna need that sword back.
gonna need the sword back, and there's only one way I can get it. Just sit there and him, basically going, oh yeah, you won that one battle, and I was captured, and so yeah, the sword's yours. Here you go. It's like, what?
Yeah, that was.
you know,
I know
that just that.
it. Well, and like I said, we still haven't seen Gideon this episode. And he keeps being mentioned, so I think we're finally going to get him in the last 2 episodes. Honestly,
Yeah, I mean, I
and
think that they've been
they have to
working.
show us. I
Well,
mean,
because
yeah.
the other thing that I liked about chapter 21 was that one woman from the whole Pershing episode, the one that basically threw him under the bus. She's the one
Hmm.
that basically was putting the little thing in the one colonel's ear or whatever about, they didn't join the New Republic. So, she's working behind the scenes. She's definitely a mole of some sort.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Ronaldo says, in my opinion, I get the Din hates droids, but the way he was kicking them was a bit childish and dumb to me. The way the droid told him not to do it felt like a parent talking to his son. Yeah, and then he goes on to say, and just so happens that the one droid he kicked was the bad one by pure coincidence. And then, of course, the Darksaber stuff was lame. And that's my
Yeah.
problem, That's the reason why I had an issue with that episode, because like I said, overall it was enjoyable. It was a fun episode to watch. It had some really cool elements to it. Like I said, I sort of like the whole mystery, Star Wars meets Law and Order vibe, but there was just some really glaringly stupid stuff in this thing. But there was also some good humor in it too. So it was enjoyable, but it was really chapter 21 that I thought was the superior
Top tier.
episode. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was actually one of the better episodes of the season, I thought. I thought that it really worked out. Oh, this is interesting. So, well, here, let me get to this one first. Ronaldo says, I guess that monster in the second episode was a ruler of Mandalore for some seconds.
Yeah.
Well, he was a mythosaur, so technically, I guess we'll find out more about that. He goes on to say the next episode was shown at Celebration. Of course it was. So I'm sure we're gonna get some leaks, about that one. At least I hope so. I don't know. I guess it just depends. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of Celebration going on, and this is only day one, right? So by the time we come on Monday for The Last Jedi and our review of that, I'm sure there's going to be a few more things that we'll mention at the very beginning, just And he says, yeah, I think Moff Gideon is in the next one. Well, he's got to be.
Yeah.
So I guess it's time to overall rate these things, huh?
I'll give 21 and I'll give it a 9. I'll give 22 7.5.
Yeah, I'll go with that. And not just to be lazy. Not just to be lazy. I think that those are both fair. I think they're fair. Because again, depending on, and a lot of it is dependent on the fact that I actually enjoyed watching 22. I mean, I suppose if I were to actually rate it on its own merit, it would probably hover more towards the 5 or 6 range, but it was fun. I liked it. And it did have some cool, different elements to it that I thought were interesting. Ronaldo basically gives 21 an 8 out of 10. Now, here we go. And 22, a 6.9 out of 10. Ronaldo. Always these weird. Man, you know what? At least it's a somewhat round, right? I mean, 6.9, dude. You might as well make it a 7.
7. Right.
I mean, you're kind of there.
It's like that kid who's like, come on, can't you just give me one more point to make it a B? Like, nope, you're a C.
Yeah, unfortunately. But of course, as I say at the end of all these things, right? It's not about what we thought. It's about what you guys think. So you still have, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds or something that you can chat in your thoughts or whatever. But pretty much, I think that in agreement, we would both say that this season has been somewhat inconsistent, very slow to start, because only now are they really getting into what we thought this whole season was going to be about. But at the same time, for the most part, the ride's been pretty enjoyable. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think We got some pretty cool episodes, especially 21, 22. Left more to be desired, but um, hopefully with these last two, we'll finish strong. Um, Rick is doing the last two episodes, so he usually does some pretty good action. So he's really a good action guy. So I don't doubt that it's probably going to be action packed for the last two.
And then Ronaldo says, have you read any leaks for the final episode? No, we haven't read any leaks. I don't think that, I don't know if there's actually any that are really on there. I haven't run into them. And I'm not one of those people that actually avoids them. I mean, sometimes, like the Luke Skywalker thing, I'm glad that wasn't spoiled for me, but it wouldn't have ruined everything. Like, some people just get so up in arms about it. Like you ruined their day or something because you spoiled it. But I will say, though, in all fairness, that I am glad that was not spoiled for me. And I am wondering, actually, because this is a good segue, because I am wondering if this is going to bring some sort of a Luke Skywalker style surprise at the end. I mean, I'm thinking we might maybe see Thrawn at the end of this. That would be one of them. That would definitely rank up there.
But, yeah, I could see him being as a hologram or something like that.
Maybe.
I don't think we're going to see him until Ahsoka, but I think we're going to see like a message or something.
Yeah, we could. But other than that, maybe there's some epic style, thing. Who knows? Maybe Han Solo shows up. I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the thing is, and we do only have 2 more episodes to go. So we'll just have to wait and see. And then Ronaldo says, I think Thrawn is mentioned in the next episode. Well, and the nice thing is he's been mentioned. I mean, he was mentioned halfway through season 2 when Rosario Dawson, as the mighty Ahsoka, uttered his name and got us all excited. So anyway, until Monday, there's going to be a gang of stuff that comes out in Celebration, so enjoy that. Like I said, there was a bunch of stuff revealed. I think they revealed some stuff on Skeleton Crew. The Ahsoka trailer's out. They actually put out the new Indiana Jones trailer, too. I saw that. They did a much longer, like a 2-minute trailer on that one. That one actually looks like it might be pretty good. I hope so. What else did they show? They had some interviews with some people. Oh, and of course they revealed the whole thing that Daisy Ridley is going to reprise her role as Rey, and they're going to do this. That might actually be the Dawn of the Jedi movie, come to think of it, where it's going to be about her restarting the Jedi Order now after Episode 9. Like I said, they got James Marigold or whatever doing that 10 Commandments style Star Wars movie about the beginnings of the Jedi and how they discovered the Force and all that. And of course they announced, which is very relevant to this episode, they've announced that they're going to do a Mandalorian movie that's going to actually tie up not only The Mandalorian, but also Ahsoka and the Book of Boba Fett. They're going to do like this whole like crossover theatrical, mind you, movie that's going to tie everything together. So, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. And we'll have to wait and see how much of it actually comes true. Because remember, last Celebration, they announced we were going to get Lando and we're going to get, Rangers of the New Republic and all this other stuff. So, whatever is announced this weekend, you also, go ahead, get excited. But remember, take it with a grain of salt because we really don't know. They're going to start doing some stuff.
Stay on the board.
Exactly. And Kathleen Kennedy is going to fire like half of the staff and, whatever. So Ronaldo says they showed a trailer for the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. They're on YouTube, but in a very bad quality. Okay, so that means they weren't official. Somebody, filmed it while they were at, yeah. Kind of like, and actually that was one of our most watched things. Remember when we showed that really bad bootleg? Hey, our friend, was it 06 Merc or whatever?
06 Mark?
Yeah, he would love that. You should go back and watch the episode where we reviewed the bootleg Mandalorian Season 3 trailer. That actually got more views than the official version that we showed. Go figure. But there are a lot of things that we can at least potentially get excited about. Let us know which episode, Chapter 21 or Chapter 22, you guys like the best in the comments section. And hey, if you want to, what are you looking forward to the most being announced at Star Wars Celebration? You know, put it in the comments. Why not? Before we close out, Ronaldo says, I think by June we'll find out that everyone was fired for creative differences. Well, you know what? If that's the case, we'll still be here to talk about it, as we are every Monday, every Friday, for the most part, at 8 o'clock. So,
relatively speaking.
Yeah, relatively speaking. That's the goal anyway. So, till Monday, be sure to join us for our Last Jedi review. Ronaldo, you're not going to want to miss that because we know you love that movie. And so, with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.